Okay, hello. Today I'm going to be talking about Asian Odyssey by Dmitri Alioshin. So Dmitri Alioshin was born in Riga, Latvia, formerly the Russian Empire, and he supposedly died in Sacramento, California in 1985. I say supposedly because I tried to look for as many sources as I can surrounding the life of this guy, but the only thing that came up was a blog by a German guy. It was in German, and also these dates came from a German census bureau or something, and another link to a Czech census. So I'm still not sure when exactly Alioshin died and lived, but it's pretty hard to say because I still haven't seen a birth certificate or a death certificate. I think it's just permanently lost. But what we do know is that he lived as a soldier, and the book, Asian Odyssey, is about his time as a white army officer and his subsequent exile from Russia and his later involvement in Mongolia and China. There's even speculation from that German blog about how this name might not even be his real name and might be a pseudonym. But again, I did not see any sources on that website. Okay, the book itself begins sort of in the middle of things. We see Alioshin in Siberia. He broke away from his main army, and he later regroups with various white army officers, and they sort of go around and torture civilians and other red army soldiers and commissars. Reading this book actually reminded me of another author, The Red Cavalry by Isaac Babel. And that's sort of the flip side of this book. It's a collection of short stories where he tells the story in the perspective of the Red Army. But I feel like, we don't get the perspective of the White Army as much when the Bolshevik Revolution is brought up. So this was a very interesting perspective to see in relation to other sources from the Bolshevik Army. Alioshin does not hold back when describing all the violence. There's a pretty graphic scene where goes into various villages and burns them down so that Bolshevik army can't get any use out of them. And another where they corner a whole battalion and they're on this cliff on horseback and they fire shells at them from all sides, so they all have to fall down from the cliff one by one. And yeah, so the whole book is just filled with anecdotes like this. Of course, Alioshin, because he was a monarchist back then, he doesn't really paint the Red Army in a very sympathetic light. He describes it as being disorganized and careless, and many of them being formerly illiterate peasant farmers that got promoted to a soldier to fight for their cause. And so he describes them as being stupid and such. But he does make sure to include the senselessness both from the Red and the White Army, which is a perspective I do appreciate. I think this is worth a read if you're looking into the Russian Revolution to see both sides of the picture. And another thing this book is notable for is it's one of the few first-hand accounts of Baron Ungern Sternberg. He was formerly a White Russian, but then he became a Mongolian warlord with aims to restore the Mongolian Empire in the likeness of Genghis Khan. But Alioshin meets Ungern Sternberg at the end of the revolution. So this is when he is at his lowest. Of course, he describes him as the common descriptors he went by. He was known as the Bloody Baron. He also describes sort of an omnipresence that the Baron imposed on his army. For example, he would personally track down any defectors and made sure they died in a horrible way. But it is still a very interesting look into Ungern Sternberg's life. The guy himself is very interesting in that regard. Again, I still don't know how much information about Alioshin is correct or even usable, because I tried looking everywhere about this guy's life and I just couldn't come up with anything. There was a Guardian article that briefly mentioned him, and they say his documents were destroyed in a bomb. But again, there's like no sources. So I don't know whether that's true or not. Oh, and by the way, you may notice that the book was written in 1941. So somewhere around the 1920s, Alioshin moved to California and he met with a publisher by the name of Harlan, I forget his name, Harlan something. And Alioshin apparently told the story to him, and Harlan convinced him to write this book recounting his events. So that's the story behind that. It was apparently in English originally. It wasn't a Russian autobiography, and then it was translated. It was just written in English. Yeah, I do think this book is worth a read. Yeah, I'll be linking the text in the description for anyone who wants to read it.